8 million units sold. This is a number that we have been wondering about for a really long time. How many people out there are actually buying handheld PCs like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, the MSI Claw, and any other handheld that I didn't think of? And we finally have an answer. Sort of, kind of, maybe? And I added all of those qualifiers because the companies that make these devices that we're talking about, for the most part, don't report sales data out publicly. So we have to depend on estimations from analysts that have access to shipping data for the parts that go into the devices that we're actually talking about. And that is where we got this 8 million number. This was posted up over at The Verge. In 2022, IDC, which is a market research firm, estimates that there were 1.6 million handheld PC units sold. In 2023, that number increased to 2.8 million, which is a massive jump, like a 75% increase year over year. Why did it jump that much? I think a lot of people are going to assume that it jumped that much because the demand for, say, the Steam Deck really increased. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's because Valve had finally caught up to demand because they had such a hard time shipping the Steam Deck in its opening year because of chip shortages from the pandemic. And so when they finally caught up, and I think that was around November of 2022, that's why we suddenly saw a huge surge in 2023. Then last year in 2024, handheld PC sales dropped 50% year over year, comparison down to 1.4 million units. And projections are saying that it's going to be around 1.9 million units this year. Essentially, handheld PC sales are completely flat. Now, the issue with this is that we don't have a lot of historical data to look back on. It's a brand new product, and we really only have 4 data points, which makes it really hard to extrapolate from. I'm also not an analyst like these people are. That said, the number of handhelds sold in the last 4 years is pretty consistent, meaning that the market for handheld PCs doesn't seem to be growing. It's also worth pointing out that these numbers are combined between the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, and the MSI Claw, and all the different versions of those 4 systems. This also doesn't include retro handhelds or devices from companies like Neo, but I don't think that those systems sell quite enough to really make a dent in these particular numbers, so we're not considering those in these calculations. If you combine the Windows handhelds mentioned earlier and the Steam Deck, that is about 6 million units in 3 years, which with 2025 projected to sell around 2 million units by the end of this year. We could be looking at about 8 million units sold across all the big manufacturers, and that number is a really small number. It is a tiny number. Just for comparison, the Nintendo Switch in its first year, back in 2017, sold 15.5 million units, and it wasn't even available for the entire year. It was unavailable for the first 3 months of the year. In the 4 years that handheld PCs have really taken off, handheld PCs combined from all the big players have yet to even hit half of what the Nintendo Switch did in 1 year. But there is another way of looking at this that isn't quite so glum. AMD's marketing chief, Frank Azor, hopefully I said your name right, they pointed out that this is a brand new device category. It didn't really exist before. I mean, it did exist before. You had all of these small companies like Neo and those ones making very few numbers of handheld PCs for very high prices. But the market for these devices essentially starts with the Steam Deck because the Steam Deck was able to make it so damn cheap. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter how well these devices have sold. Sure, it does matter because as handheld enthusiasts, we are curious about it, but it doesn't matter how many they sell because they aren't consoles. Yes, I often refer to the Steam Deck as a console because it feels like one, but it's a PC, and just like all of the other handhelds are, they're PCs, and that means that they don't suffer from the same issues that consoles do. Typically, if a console doesn't sell very well, nobody's going to make games for it. The need to sell lots of units or games won't be made is not an issue with PCs. PC is an absolute monster platform, with Valve, the big dog in the fight, seeing 39 million concurrent players already on one day this year. So PC games are going to keep getting made, whether people are buying handheld PCs or not. Some games will require more power than handhelds can really provide, but most games are going to work just fine on handhelds. Just look at your Steam library and count the number of games that don't play well on your Steam Deck or your ROG Ally or Legion Go. I think that number's way less than the number of games that you probably own. At least that's true for me. But let's take a closer look at these stats, which are combined. How many of those were Steam Deck? How many of those were Asus or Lenovo? And while we don't have hard numbers, what we do have are estimates, and IDC estimates that the vast majority of the handhelds that we're talking about in question are Steam Decks. In fact, they say that if you add up all the MSI, all the Lenovo, all the Asus devices, the Steam Deck by itself outpaces all of them combined, which is crazy to me because the Steam Deck is not available in stores in the US. Steam Deck sold 100% of the data that we're talking about in 2022. It had a year head start over the others. So you might think, okay, well, that's the reason why there's so many more Steam Decks. But in 2023, the Steam Deck accounted for over 50% of the 2023 handheld sales and over 48% of the 2024 data. So the Steam Deck just continued to do very, very well all 3 years and is projected to do well next year as well. So by that math, it seems like Valve has sold at least 3.8 million units, and IDC says it's probably over 4 million at this point. Although honestly, I mean, I'm just a nerd in his attic, so what do I know? But I think that they've sold probably closer to 5 million or more than 5 million at this point. But perhaps you're somebody who really doesn't want a Steam Deck. You don't want to switch over to Linux. That's for anybody who's new here. The Steam Deck runs SteamOS, which is a Linux operating system. It's really great, and it is my preferred gaming environment. However, there are some games that will not work due to anti-cheat or DRM, so it is understandable why somebody may want to stick with Windows if that's the case, if the games that they want to play are not compatible due to all of those factors that I just mentioned a second ago. If that's the case, then this news might be a little deflating to you. I mean, sales are flat. Valve is dominating the competition. It sounds pretty grim for the Windows handhelds out there, but most of the Windows handhelds are essentially laptop parts crammed into a handheld form factor. These companies have already done the hard part of squeezing the square peg that is a laptop into the round hole that is a handheld. So now, all they really have to do is make minor updates when the chips are available. So if you are a Windows handheld user, I wouldn't worry that your platform of choice is going anywhere anytime soon, and I anticipate that you will continue to see lots of choices when it comes to Windows handhelds. That said, I do wish that Valve had a smaller piece of the pie, and it's not because I don't like Valve, I do, or because I don't like the Steam Deck, I do. It is my favorite handheld right now, even though it's not the one that I play the most, and I'll mention more about that in a little bit. The reason I want Valve to have a little bit smaller of a piece of the pie is because I think competition is a good thing. I want Valve to feel some pressure to force them to innovate. Competition pushes platform holders to innovate rather than stagnate. It gives us cheaper prices and better features. Competition highlights differences between devices, which may inspire Valve to update their hardware further. For example, we've got the Lenovo Legion Go S, which just shipped, and it has this cool feature that I really wish was on every single handheld and every single controller out there, and that's trigger locks. Something I would love to see Valve implement. It allows you to use digital trigger inputs for shooters, but then analog triggers for racing games. This isn't really something that you can fake in software. You can try, you can come close, but it's not close enough. So I would love to see trigger locks come to the Steam Deck, or the next Steam Deck, I guess. I would also love to see Valve throw a fingerprint sensor on the deck for logging in instantaneously. On the Ally, this didn't really work very well, but on the Ally X, it works amazingly well. I really like that feature, and it's something that I would like to see on the Steam Deck. I also constantly use it on my Ayaneo Pocket DMG and my Ayaneo Pocket Evo. They work great, and I just put my finger on the power button and I'm automatically logged in without having to punch any numbers in to keep my device secure. Competition is good for us, the end users, but I also see people constantly getting super tribalistic about their device of choice. This isn't the console wars, people. They all pretty much play the same games. They're all PCs at the end of the day. And I don't understand why people have this us versus them mentality when it comes to handheld PCs, or hell, when it comes to video games in general. It just does not make sense to me. They're all great. Whichever one is right for you depends on what features are most important to you. For example, if I were to put my most important features on a list, I would say that convenience is number one for me, then comfort, then battery life, and then probably screen quality, followed finally by power. So even though I said earlier that my favorite device is the Steam Deck, I do use my ROG Ally X more often because I have a massive 4TB M.2 2280 drive in that device. So all my games are always just ready wherever I am. It's super convenient. And M.2 2280 drives are a lot cheaper to get than M.2 2230 drives of the same storage footprint. So that's why I ended up going with the 4TB in the ROG Ally X. If I had the same drive size in my Steam Deck as I have in the ROG Ally X, I probably wouldn't be picking up my ROG X nearly as often. Even though I really like that device, I find the Steam Deck to be way more comfortable, and it has the trackpads, which are super useful. Anyway, let me know in the comment section down below that like button, what features are most important to you? Rank them 1 to 5. What makes it most important to you when you are deciding which handheld you want to play in on? And also let me know what you think of these sales numbers. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching, and before you go, check out this video right here. Stay rad, everybody.